Welcome to the verse-by-verse study of the book of Proverbs. We shall finish chapter 30 today, starting with verse 11. The author begins with a list. In fact, most of these verses contain a list. He's describing some of the ugly attributes of an attitude of pride. There are those who curse their fathers and do not bless their mothers. Those who are pure in their own eyes and yet are not cleansed of their filth. Those whose eyes are ever so haughty, whose glances are so disdainful. Those whose teeth are swords and whose jaws are set like knives to devour the poor from the earth and the needy from among mankind. So he first notes one of the attributes, that pride leads us to becoming ungrateful, even condescending, even to our parents. Next, pride can blind us of not seeing or dealing with our faults and our filth. We also become judgmental, looking down our nose and speaking ill of those we see as inferior. God warned that pride is the beginning of sin, and therefore the beginning of disgrace, as opposed to humility, which leads to wisdom and blessings. The theologian C.S. Lewis said, pride is the anti-God attitude and is a spiritual cancer that can eat away at our capacity to love, to have compassion, to have contentment, and even common sense. The author will continue with another list beginning in verse 15. It's a sample list and a graphic description of the sadness and the insatiable attitude of sin. The leech has two daughters. Give, give, they cry. There are three things that are never satisfied. Four that never say enough. First, the grave or Sheol. Second, the barren womb. Third, land which is never satisfied with water. And lastly, fire, which never says enough. The reference to two daughters is likely a reference to a leech, a common leech that has suckers at both ends and attaches mostly to animals and literally can suck the life from them. This creature is never satisfied. Next, he referenced Sheol, the place of the dead, a place again of no hope, no life. And this barren womb, of course, refers to the deep pain and sadness of a loss of a child or the inability to conceive. The barren land is one that no matter how much hard work is put in or water's invested, it produces no life. And the author's last metaphor is fire. Again, no matter how much fuel we feed it, it is never satisfied. Next, a warning. The eye that mocks a father, that scorns an aged mother, will be plucked out by the ravens of the valley, will be eaten by the vultures. The author speaks of the eye as a window into our heart. This prideful heart, again, mocks and scorns, disrespects, dishonors, disregards the parents and their wise instructions. An arrogant heart that loses sight of compassion and self-restraint. The stern warning is that a prideful person is on a blind path to self-destruction. The author now makes a beautiful pause and does some self-reflecting and gives us some examples of the majesty and the wonderment of God. Remember, this was 3,000 years ago. There are three things that are too amazing for me. Four that I do not understand. First, the way of the eagle in the sky. Second, the way of the snake on a rock. Third, the way of a ship on the high seas. And lastly, the way of a man with a young woman. All of these are examples of God's amazing miracle of movement. Movement that is not man-made. First, we have the graceful soaring flight of an eagle. that reaches heights of 10,000 feet or so. Next, an amazing speed of a snake. Despite having no legs, it can have bursts of speed that can outrun humans. Or the invisible wind that effortlessly moves large ships gracefully across the water. And lastly, we have the unexplainable, the powerful movement of pure, selfless love that brings two people together for a lifetime. The author is saying that I am humbled by seeing what is around me, the wonderment of God. Now he will give a contrast of God's pure selfless love versus man-made lust. This is the way of an adulterous woman or man. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I've done nothing wrong. Adultery is a prideful, brutal, selfish decision of betrayal that brings deep heartache to both the innocent and the guilty. Now next the author will continue with 4 more examples of selfish pride. Under 3 things the earth trembles. Under 4 it cannot bear up. A servant who becomes king. A godless fool who gets plenty to eat. A contemptible woman who gets married. And lastly, a servant who displaces her mistress. He begins with a lowly person that is blessed by God with this great authority. But the implication here is that because of his pride, rather than being grateful and helping the poor, that power goes to his head and he rules harshly. Next is the fool that apparently has been blessed by sudden inherited wealth. And because he now has plenty, he has no incentive for self-restraint. Next is a bitter, quarrelsome, complaining, selfish person who finally is blessed by getting married. But rather than being joyful and grateful, they continue to be contentious, causing needless heartache within the marriage. The last example is this prideful sin that brings heartache to many. That is a husband that abandons his wife for a younger servant girl. Another list of the wonders of God combined with a message about humility. 4 things on earth are small and humble, yet they are extremely wise. Ants are creatures of little strength, yet they wisely store up their food in the summer. Hyrax, which is a small badger, are creatures of little power, yet they wisely make their home in the cracks or the crags, rocks for protection. Locusts have no king, yet they orderly advance together in ranks. A lizard or gecko can be caught with the hand, yet it is clever enough to be found in a king's palace, in the king's palaces. The author's point is, just because something is small and humble does not mean they cannot be wise. His powerful point is there's no reason to be arrogant and prideful, that you can be small and humble and still accomplish great things with God. Now another list about our godly walk. There are 3 things that are stately in their stride, their walk. 4 that move with stately bearing. A lion, mighty among the beasts, who retreats before nothing. A strutting rooster. A he-goat, which is the lead goat, the alpha goat. And a king secure against revolt, meaning that he's secure against invasion because he has a strong army to back him up. Again, the author's point is that Christian humility does not mean we walk with our heads down and our shoulders slumped. Those that walk with Christ, those that walk with God, are called to walk upright, confident, with purpose and joy. The author closes with, if you play the fool, and exalt yourself, meaning talking pridefully, or if you plan or speak ill, clap your hands over your mouth. For as churning cream produces butter, and as a twist the nose produces blood, So stirring up anger produces strife. Recall that a fool is someone that either says there is no God or says they have no need for God, implying that they are arguing that they are smarter and more resourceful than God. As stated here, a life of pride will be a life of unneeded strife and will end up with a bloody nose. That concludes chapter 30. We shall begin chapter 31, the final chapter of the book, next week. Until then, may God bless you, bless your family with both his grace and peace. Aloha.